Tonight on 24, escalation of the confrontation between Tehran and Washington over the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Secretary of War says the naval blockade of Iran will continue as long as necessary. Araghchi has said that the United States is making a miscalculation once again. Amid Iranian fuel shortages, Kerman authorities halted the $87,000 gasoline pilot project within hours. And reactions to the heavy sentence for a photojournalist in Iran. The International Federation of Journalists says the 15-year sentence for Yalda Moaiery is a new level of crackdown. From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad. Greetings and good day to Iran International viewers in Iran and across the world. An hour ago, the U.S. Secretary of War said that the country's military can maintain the blockade of Iran's ports for as long as necessary because ships are being replaced on a rotational basis. This comes at a time when Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic, wrote on the X social network that the war against Iran was an example of Washington's miscalculations, and now the U.S. is making an even bigger mistake regarding the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, the Khatam al-Anbiya central headquarters also deemed the U.S. report about the normal movement of vessels through this strait to be inaccurate. Our reporter Samira Garai has joined us from the White House. Samira, the rhetoric is getting heated again. It seems like the calm before the storm.
Just as from the Islamic Republic side, we're seeing this harshness. They are warning them not to repeat the same mistake regarding the Strait of Hormuz that they made at the start of the war against the Islamic Republic. This is while from the United States side, one important move we're seeing in the Strait of Hormuz area is this very replacement of the aircraft carrier for the Lincoln. In recent days, reports have been published here and there that this carrier's mission has been expanded, and some of the crew, nearly 5,000 American troops, are on board this aircraft carrier. Some issues have come up for them. The duration has gotten long, and it's scheduled to be replaced. Now, this hasn't been officially announced by the Pentagon tomorrow, but it's news that the Wall Street Journal published, citing informed sources affiliated with the Pentagon. And Mr. Hegseth, the Secretary of War, also made comments today, specifically regarding the Strait of Hormuz, that relate to these rotational actions. They are actively working to replace the forces currently stationed throughout the region, swapping out aging hardware with fresher, newer equipment, while upgrading facilities to ensure a sustained presence for the long haul. This is no longer a silent conflict. It is now an active war, directly catalyzed by the ongoing U.S. naval blockade. Just this week, that reality was starkly underscored when a U.S. military helicopter fired a missile at a merchant vessel flying the Panamanian flag, clearly demonstrating that full-scale naval warfare is underway in these waters. Now, the Lincoln's deployment has stretched on for an unusually long time because it was sent to the Middle East back in January after starting out in November. Various reports have started surfacing that the crew ran completely out of basic daily necessities like paper towels and toothpaste, with many sailors dealing with persistent seasickness. In the last 200 days, the ship has not docked at any port for a rest break, leaving the crew stranded continuously on the water. Being deployed at sea for such a grueling period has clearly generated serious logistical strains and morale issues, even though the Pentagon still hasn't officially responded to questions regarding these growing problems. But other media outlets monitoring U.S. Navy news had said, for example, that a few crew members wanted to jump into the water. This news was reported in the last 10 days. Now, the Wall Street Journal says the Lincoln is supposed to leave, and the George Washington aircraft carrier strike group is supposed to enter the region. In recent weeks, it was in the Far East, passing through the Strait of Malacca, heading toward the Middle East. Once it arrives, the Lincoln will leave there. This means that this naval blockade will continue. The Islamic Republic is also issuing stern warnings, cautioning that this approach represents a major strategic mistake. But the United States continues moving its geopolitical pieces. Specifically, Washington intends to maintain its ongoing naval blockade. In our conversation last week, we noted that during a Sunday interview with Axios, Mr. Trump outlined a strategic pivot. That approach focuses on remaining low-key, meaning quietly pursuing its present course without drawing unnecessary public attention, while keeping the current naval blockade firmly in place. peace. He strongly believes that sustaining this maritime pressure can further intensify the severe economic pressure on the regime, writing that this critical financial leverage is essentially all that is left for the Islamic Republic at this stage. It's fake news, and with 300% inflation, let's wait and see what inflation will do with the Islamic Republic. For this wait, they need to be militarily prepared in the Strait of Hormuz. This is one part of their strategy. Another thing that CENTCOM announced an hour ago is launching a new squadron. It's made of a collection of drones and USVs, meaning remotely controlled craft, whether up in the sky, now aerial craft, or USVs, both on the water surface and underwater. So in these three areas, the United States is forming a squadron. These military assets and equipment will not belong exclusively to the United States either, as CENTCOM is actively inviting multiple other nationalities, particularly partner Arab countries situated around the Persian Gulf region, to join the coalition. They are officially naming this unit the Falcon Strike Squadron. A few months ago, officials had formed a similar concept, which essentially served as a trial version of what is now being implemented much more fully. Although I call it a trial version, forces actively utilized it during Operation Epic Fury, so it certainly did not remain just a test run. Ultimately, establishing the squadron serves as another major strategic measure, alongside the regional deployment of the aircraft carrier USS George Washington into the area.
Thank you, Samira Garai, joining us from the White House. My other colleague, Kambiz Tavana, has also joined us from our other studio in Washington. Kambiz, it seems that with this continuation of the naval blockade, in a way, the United States is squeezing the Islamic Republic's throat, at least economically. But in past instances, we've seen that while it might be hard for them to breathe, their hands are still somewhat free. Sometimes when they get desperate, they start attacking U.S. and allies' interests in the region. Some of the guards, sometimes when they get desperate, start attacking U.S. and allies' interests. Well, I'm not entirely sure if my voice is coming through clearly or not, but regarding the discussion we were having earlier, which Samira also brought up, this brand new specialized task force established by CENTCOM carries a remarkably serious message in itself. The core message being communicated is that, regardless of how persistently Iran attempts to argue that their military strategy relies on asymmetric tactics to counter American pressure through unconventional means, the United States is taking a firm stand. Essentially, the U.S. is signaling that if Iran believes such asymmetric strategies can be successfully executed without a direct response, the American military will adapt accordingly by stepping away from purely traditional symmetric warfare to effectively counter those threats. Furthermore, there is a clear shift toward asymmetric warfare tactics, given that even the unmanned aerial vehicles currently deployed are primarily one-way attack drones. This strategy closely mirrors the operational playbook long utilized by Iran and its regional proxy networks. However, two crucial factors must be carefully considered in this context. First, the recent dynamics unfolding between Iran and the United States highlight a complex, high-stakes balancing act. Second, the fundamental question remains as to how long both parties can sustain their respective strategic options under these precise conditions. They must operate within a delicate corridor, avoiding escalation beyond a dangerous threshold, while also preventing their response from falling below a level of credible deterrence. Ultimately, this precarious equilibrium must be maintained for long enough to allow each side to plausibly declare victory and satisfy domestic political demands at a future juncture. The primary problem with this current policy or strategic framework is that the margin for error remains exceptionally high, because a single stray shot, miscalculated attack, or minor escalation could cause the entire situation to fall apart instantly. But at the very least, as Samira rightly pointed out, it has become undeniably clear that this persistent naval blockade established by the United States is firmly entrenched and is not going to budge anytime soon. It is simply not going anywhere. On the other hand, if you have been closely monitoring the breaking developments across Iran's domestic energy and gasoline sector from yesterday until now, even though we rarely receive transparent or precise details from Islamic Republic officials, significant underlying pressures are surfacing regarding the true impact of the ongoing naval blockade. It is increasingly evident that significant strategic pressure is mounting in the region. A related issue has also emerged and will likely dominate tomorrow's discussion, as numerous reports published here in Washington highlight growing concerns over U.S. weapons stockpiles facing potential depletion. Conversely, we currently lack comprehensive reporting on the internal internal situation within Iran. Nevertheless, it is reasonable to conclude that their national reserves, whether consisting of oil exports or military armaments, are likewise being heavily drawn down. Consequently, this persistent strain is almost certainly exerting a similar parallel pressure on their capabilities, producing the exact inverse effect on their own strategic reserves as they continue to expend these vital resources over time. What can be clearly stated about the current geopolitical situation is that the United States has officially decided to maintain its strategic naval blockade for the time being. As Samira noted, allowing them to continue this posture may be the best course of action right now. On one hand, everyone is closely watching to see how Iran will ultimately respond to this persistent pressure. The ongoing discussion surrounding Iran's potential countermoves becomes particularly critical when viewed through this specific lens. It remains undeniable that despite these overt military maneuvers, the U.S. is simultaneously attempting to engage with the Islamic Republic across multiple channels. These diplomatic efforts include indirect talks, direct dialogue, and messaging through regional mediators in an active bid to de-escalate tensions and potentially secure a lasting agreement. But on the one hand, that group inside Iran that might be dissatisfied with the conditions at any moment for any reason could throw everything off with just a very routine drone shot.
Then, on one hand,
Mainly,
it can also
these
be
ongoing
said that,
hardships
at least
stem
with
from
the
the current
movement of the
geopolitical
USS
tension,
George
particularly
Washington
the
toward
strictly
the
enforced
region,
naval
it can be
blockade
said,
and
giving
heavy
further
economic
thought to this
siege
situation,
recently
it
reported
remains
and
entirely
maintained by the
unclear
United
whether
States.
the United States actually possesses a concrete strategic plan. It could certainly be argued that clarity is lacking on both sides. In fact, one of the regional experts I spoke with recently noted, "I am not particularly optimistic that this ongoing friction between Iran and the US will be resolved before November. It seems far more likely to drag on indefinitely." As we observe developments over the coming days and weeks, current military posture strongly indicates that the US is not prepared to abandon its naval blockade tomorrow. Ultimately, Washington has concluded that this blockade represents the single most valuable tactical leverage tool it currently holds.
Thank you, Kambi Savannah, my colleague from our other studio in Washington. In Tehran, Mohammad Makbar, advisor to Mojtaba Khamenei, says the definitive strategy of the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic is that if Tehran doesn't get its demands, the war will take on an offensive posture. According to Makbar, implementing this strategy will transform the global equations of power, and he considers it to be the most sustainable new regional order. Political analyst Jaber Rajabi joins us. Mr. Rajabi, do you think it's just bravado, or do they really have such a vision of the world?
Endless greetings. To an extent, you could say it's bravado. To an extent, it's that the Islamic Republic has come to the conclusion that the US wants to finish it off. That's why you see them delaying negotiations at the Security Council, because they know their own conditions best, and they know that when the US has entered the field this strongly with the events that have occurred in recent months, well, the US probably doesn't want to lose this chance. To catch the Islamic Republic in perhaps what could be called its absolute weakest state. But while the other side is also saying a new order is forming, in one part we really have to say he's right. If the Islamic Republic emerges unscathed from this prolonged war, in whatever way that may happen, well, its geopolitical standing will definitely be very different from before. That Islamic Republic will certainly be much more uncontrollable and emboldened. Israel knows this, the US knows this, and the surrounding countries in the region know this too. They know that if this Islamic Republic survives, and then somehow comes out of this situation intact, well, conditions will become very tough. That's why the Islamic Republic is thinking here that, well, instead of sitting by until they come finish me off, let me do something. Let me, strike the first blow rather than respond with a second blow. But we have to see if the Islamic Republic actually has the conditions for this, if it can actually go on the offensive. So the thing is, it wants to. It wants to. What I'm saying is, this part isn't just bravado, but as for whether it has the tools for this task, no, it doesn't. Look at what's happening right now in the news, and with the gasoline situation. Well, it couldn't even finish that trial run, and there's a terrible budget deficit. The siege is getting deeper every day. The Islamic Republic, a country of 80 to 90 million, I think it wants to, but it just doesn't have the tools.
Why do you say it doesn't have the tools? Didn't it attack nearly 11 countries up until now with this very same limited capability? Wasn't it with this exact missile and drone program? Well, if it intensifies that, it becomes an offensive program again.
No, when I reference tools, I am certainly not merely referring to traditional weapons of war. First of all, we must look at what the United States has accomplished. Right now, in the immediate aftermath following Ali Khamenei's death, the prevailing atmosphere is driven either by a full state of war or an intense emotional state. The Islamic Republic launched an attack using every resource at its disposal, introducing novel tactics that caught many nations completely off guard. Nobody was genuinely prepared for the sudden disruption near the Strait of Hormuz. However, today marks a shift. That intense, warlike, and emotional atmosphere has finally begun to recede, even among regime officials. Much like a person who has barely survived a harrowing physical accident, the United States desperately wanted key actors to recognize the sheer scale of the danger they were truly up against. That represents the crucial first point. The second point is that various regional countries, utilizing every strategic tool at their disposal, have gradually shifted toward taking decisive collective action to halt the Islamic Republic's aggressive influence. Consider the recent escalation, when nearly 2,700 missiles are launched directly toward the United Arab Emirates. How many actually hit their targets? Furthermore, numerous nations that historically had deep diplomatic issues with Israel are now, both openly and covertly, standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel against Tehran. Every day, the Islamic Republic is announcing, "I've closed the Strait of Hormuz," but at least 8 or 9 ships are passing through with their transponders turned on, and who knows how many are passing with them turned off. But the tool I'm mostly talking about is the capability where war isn't just missiles and drones. War on the brink means being able to absorb the blow, being able to withstand the hits. Your economy needs to be able to absorb the blows. Your industry, or let's say people's basic needs, bread and butter, so many things, need to be maintained. Well, right now, the Islamic Republic has problems in various areas. Electricity, different things. There's an economic crisis. Well, we look at all of these, and put this aside too. Right now, you really don't see unity in the Islamic Republic, meaning you can actually see that a deep divide exists. Well, just look at these appointments it has made too. So the tool means if you want to turn the war into an offensive one, meaning you want to go suicidal and throw everything you have into the middle, I don't think that's possible right now. Set all of these arguments aside for a moment. You simply do not control the skies above. The Islamic Republic lacks domain over its own airspace, which means Iran is completely vulnerable from overhead, and any sudden strike could occur at any given moment. That is precisely why I believe they lack the necessary defensive tools. Furthermore, the United States is actively intensifying its efforts to exploit this critical weakness, deepening strategic disruptions, so that when they finally decide to strike, they can land a decisive blow far more easily.
Thank you, Jaber Rajabi, political analyst with us. A pilot program for offering gasoline at refinery rates in Kerman was suspended just a few hours after it began. Under this plan, consumption was supposed to be capped at 150 liters per month at current rates, but any gasoline beyond that amount would be calculated at 87,200 tomans per liter. Officials had stated the goal of this plan was to reduce fuel smuggling in the southeastern regions. However, the director of the Kerman Oil Products Distribution Company says that following the governor's intervention and for further review, the implementation of the plan has been suspended until further notice, and gasoline distribution continues as before.
Masume Tahir-Hani, economic analyst, joins us from London. Ms. Tahir-Hani, why do you think they conducted such a test, and what made them halt it so quickly? It doesn't seem like this test was done completely blindly or purely out of fear of potential riots or public discontent. I think it's a very well thought out plan, and it's not something that started today. If you look back, start from day, actually not even day, but Azar 1404, when we had the third gas price tier. Back then, the government started talking about a floating price for imported super gasoline. Around that time, many were whispering that this was just testing the waters to see if other gas prices could be raised too. Then we hit day, and the so-called subsidy reform took place, reform being the term the government uses for it. That dealt a huge shock to the economy, and the government's plan was to go ahead and raise gas prices by fund. However, the war that broke out ended up postponing the whole thing. So where do we stand right now? 5 months into the year, the water, electricity, and gas bills being issued, whether for households or the industrial sector, are all pointing toward the elimination of energy subsidies in the economy. The TAW the government has raised regarding gasoline carries that exact same testing the market vibe again. If you look at it, this plan was piloted in a province that's extremely quiet, far from the center, making it much easier to manage any potential unrest or commotion that might result from these disruptions. It's definitely a lot easier for them over there. So the bottom line is, the government is at a point where it wants to completely strip away everything it used to give fuel under the guise of energy subsidies and charge them current market prices. Yet alongside that, it offers absolutely no compensation whatsoever to the general public, neither by directly supporting lower-income households, nor by deregulating the auto market, expanding local public transit networks, or upgrading vital road infrastructure. Furthermore, the overall inflationary effects of this measure are extraordinarily high. Make no mistake, this brief pause happening right now is purely temporary, and we will inevitably see a steep price hike in the very near future.
Thank you. That was Masume Tahir-Khani, economic analyst, joining us from London.
In the U.S., media outlets continue to reveal more details about the security threat against Donald Trump on his way back from a previous trip to Turkey. ABC News reported that fears of an Iranian cell equipped with a shoulder-fired missile prompted a secret change to the U.S. president's flight path. The Washington Post also wrote that the initial intelligence regarding this threat came from Israel. According to the paper, the CIA initially had low confidence in the credibility of this intel, but in the end, American officials decided not to take any risks and put special security measures in place for Trump's departure from Turkey.
Our reporter, Marzia Hosseini, joins us from the U.S. Congress. Marzia, even now, a few days after that initial Washington Post report, the shock of the story hasn't faded regarding the lengths Americans were willing to go to counter what they perceived as a threat from the Islamic Republic.
Right. And the reason this tension isn't dying down and this media buzz continues is because these reporters just won't let it go. They already had a bone to pick with Trump from the start. And now that they feel Trump kind of played them, they're planning to keep pushing this story and won't drop it. But the new detail in the news today regarding this issue is that while we knew these events took place, the reason behind them wasn't clear. Reports today indicate that Israel alerted the CIA, questioning their inaction, while claiming the Islamic Republic was actively planning to target Donald Trump's plane. However, the CIA explicitly noted that its internal intelligence assessment found the Israeli claims to lack credibility. Federal intelligence officials subsequently briefed senior members of the Trump administration, explaining that given the specific security atmosphere and overall conditions in Ankara, the threat report appeared inaccurate. Furthermore, the CIA warned Trump administration officials that Israel was likely fabricating or exaggerating these intelligence reports in a deliberate effort to manipulate and influence President Trump's broader foreign policy decision-making regarding strategic matters in the Middle East. It says officials close to Trump were also aware, but they told themselves, well, just to be safe, let's go ahead and, in fact, set up this plan. And that's how, in the end, Trump, who was originally supposed to leave Turkey on the Qataris' Boeing 747, said, I'll go for old time's sake and leave on my own Air Force One, the old plane, and ultimately left Turkey on a C-32 aircraft escorted by F-16s, although military officials, specifically the Secret Service, still claim that it wasn't out of the realm of possibility either. Officials emphasize that concrete evidence revealed the presence of individuals in Ankara equipped with surface-to-air missiles, confirming that a credible threat indeed existed. Consequently, Secret Service risk evaluations, heavily influenced by previous threats against Donald Trump and the harrowing assassination attempt on American soil in Pennsylvania, dictated that these heightened precautions were entirely expected and driven by common sense. However, the narrative took a complex turn regarding the journalists instructed to remain inside Air Force One with their window shades drawn. Media reports indicated that these measures were enforced right around the time Mr. Trump initially boarded the aircraft, sparking further intrigue. Once the windows were closed, he got off the plane and boarded a military aircraft. And this whole staging was so elaborate, bizarre, and Hollywood-esque that the media and journalists still can't believe they were, so to speak, played like that. They say after that, they brought Trump back inside Air Force One and then took him off again. This whole story and this entire assassination plot, which we know is said to be due to potential targeted attacks by the Islamic Republic, dates back to July 6th, nearly a month ago. Initially, reporters were also saying something seemed off, but it wasn't clear what the issue was. because during that same time frame, while Trump was in Turkey, he published a post on his social network saying that we decided to switch our plane. For a week or two, the question was why the plane was changed, and now the reason has become clear. It was the Israelis' doing.
Thank you, my colleague Marzia Hosseini from the U.S. Congress. In an exclusive response to Iran International, the French Foreign Ministry stated that the Islamic Republic must end the use of the death penalty as an instrument of repression. This stance comes in response to Abbas Araghchi's protest against the joint statement by France and several other countries regarding executions in Iran. Paris has also called on the authorities of the Islamic Republic to listen to the voices of the people and their demands for change, instead of suppressing them. More details from my colleague Lily Nikfar.
The French Foreign Ministry's response to Iran International, in fact, reaffirmed the exact position raised yesterday by Paris, 32 other countries, and the European Union, that using the death penalty to silence opponents, instill fear in society, and punish individuals who are demanding and exercising their fundamental rights is unjustifiable. This response came after Abbas Araghchi, the Foreign Minister of the Islamic Republic, accused France of hypocrisy regarding human rights. Araghchi said that France's support for Israel in the Gaza war, and also during the conflict with the Islamic Republic, has, according to him, caused Paris to lose the moral standing required to criticize the Islamic Republic on human rights and international law. But the French Foreign Ministry, in its response to us, rejected this criticism and once again called on officials of the Islamic Republic to end using the death penalty as a tool for repression. The statement strongly emphasized that officials within the Islamic Republic must cease their harsh repression and instead genuinely listen to the Iranian people, honoring their legitimate demands for meaningful reform and immediately releasing all individuals who have been arbitrarily detained. Adding to this pressure, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot delivered a sharp condemnation, pointing out that months after the brutal crackdown on nationwide protests, Tehran continues its severe repression by drastically increasing executions. Consequently, this de-escalation over the regime's rapid wave of state executions has now escalated into a direct, open, and unprecedented diplomatic confrontation between Paris and Tehran, straining bilateral ties and drawing critical global attention.
Lily Nikfar, Brussels. In Israel, the Jerusalem Post reported on the risk of deportation of an Iranian-American citizen named Ramim Parsa from the country. According to the newspaper, Parsa, who is an American citizen, has been living in Israel for 3 years and has an Israeli wife and a young child. The Israeli Interior Ministry previously rejected his citizenship application due to his birth in Iran. And despite the court calling for a review of the case, the Interior Ministry has once again opposed him staying. Parsa now has up to 2 weeks to submit his final appeal, otherwise he might be deported from Israel. Raman Parsa, author and social activist, has joined us from Jerusalem. Mr. Parsa, I actually happened to see your video on these Jerusalem Post social media channels, and well, I was somewhat surprised, because we don't usually have that many non-Jewish Iranian immigrants in Israel. Tell us your story. How did you even end up in Israel in the first place?
Greetings to you, Fardad, and I send my greetings to the risen nation of Iran. Greetings to all of you. Yes, I lived in America as a U.S. citizen for nearly 15 years, and in 2020 I met my wife, who was born in Israel. She is an Israeli who is Jewish. We first connected because of a powerful video she came across from Iran. In the clip, Iranian university students intentionally avoided stepping on the Israeli flag that the Islamic Republic had painted on the ground, despite the regime's deliberate attempt to force the public into trampling the symbol as a display of state-mandated hatred. These brave young people carefully walked around it instead. Seeing that moment was a profound revelation for my wife and many other Israelis. It sparked a deep affection and admiration for the Iranian populace, serving as undeniable proof that the government's hostile stance does not reflect the hearts of the citizens, and that ordinary Iranians do not inherently hate the people of Israel. And what happened was that we met each other, and since she's an artist, she wanted to paint a painting to basically let the Iranian people know that we love you too. You are not our enemy. We are not your enemy either. And we met each other. This painting is in the shape of 2 hands that are like a heart, actually an Israeli flag and a lion and sun flag. And this flag, this painting that she published, I came across it and we started talking. And this love of ours began. And we got married in that same year of 2020. And in 2023, 7 months before October 7th, we came to Israel. And here, as the spouse of an Israeli, we applied for residency, permanent residency. And unfortunately, because we were born in Iran, as you know, all over the world, because of the Islamic Republic, they harass people and say that because you are from a hostile country, a government that has been so hostile to Israel for 47 years. And because of this, there is a law in Israel that people born in enemy countries cannot get residency in Israel. And because of this, we went to court. The court, but you applied with an American passport, right? Yes, I applied as a U.S. citizen, and the court was very much in our favor. The judge was very much in our favor and said that this is a U.S. citizen, he has a good record, he supports Israel, his wife is Israeli, his kids are Jewish, and because of this, the court canceled it. And they were supposed to issue another ruling, make another decision, but they made the same decision again. We're going back to court again, but these things are getting sorted out. All of these are problems that the Islamic Republic has created for the people of Iran, so that wherever Iranians go, they view them as enemies or terrorists. But the people of Israel are very good people, kind. They love the Iranian people. And in my daily conversations with them, I am very, very much in love with the Iranian people. And I tell them here, to the Israelis, that the Iranian people are different from the Iranian government. The Islamic Republic is not Iran, and Iran is not the Islamic Republic. And after October 7th, we used to cook for the soldiers. We made kebabs, brought them food, and told them that we are the real Iranians, not this Islamic Republic that has been ruining the reputation of the Iranian nation for 47 years, ruining the dignity of the Iranian nation. And the real Iran is the people of Iran. God forbid, if your case doesn't work out and the government still insists on deporting you from Israel, what is your plan? Will you go to America? You said your wife is Israeli. What does she want to do? Yes, that is correct. We currently have a young child who is roughly 1.5 years old, and we are also expecting another child very soon. Just a few days ago, the U.S. ambassador called me directly, Mr. Mike Huckabee, who is a wonderful friend of ours in Israel. I prepared a letter for Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he sent this letter on our behalf. So now we are just waiting. Meanwhile, in court, we filed a legal appeal, and we are waiting to go to court as well to see what the court says. If we were to go back, we'd go to America. Strong connections. God willing, Iran will be freed and will go back to Iran and celebrate at Persepolis. Thank you, Ramin Parsa, author and social activist, joining us from Jerusalem. Thank you. The International Federation of Journalists, IFJ, has issued a scathing condemnation regarding the 15-year prison sentence handed to Iranian photojournalist Yalda Moaiery, while urgently demanding that all charges against her be unconditionally dropped. Highlighting the gravity of the situation, Anthony Bellinger, the Secretary General of the Global Press Union, stated that the Islamic Republic has reached a perilous new peak of repression. He noted that the regime is drastically escalating punitive measures against its vocal critics in an explicit, systemic attempt to terrorize and silence working journalists and political dissidents alike. Unfolding under contentious circumstances, Moaiery revealed that the Tehran Revolutionary Court tried her in absentia, handing down the harsh 15-year penalty strictly in connection with her legitimate media coverage, photojournalism activity. Last winter, just a few days after thousands of young people were killed in the streets, IRGC forces raided my home and confiscated my cell phone, laptop, and some of my electronic devices. A month later, because of the photos I had taken during the 44-day war, they raided my home again, this time without a court warrant, taking everything with them in this raid, even the cameras I had since childhood. I was interrogated several times, and eventually my case was referred to Branch 33 of the Security Prosecutor's Office, and then to Branch 29 of the Revolutionary Court presided over by Judge Mazloum. Tried without my presence, and in absentia, I was sentenced to 15 years in prison. However, none of these sentences have caused me for even a moment to give up on the path I've taken. I've continued to record and show the realities of Iranian society and its people. Omid Memadian, political analyst at the Dawn Institute, joins us from Detroit. Mr. Memadian, I'll ask you about these cases and heavy sentences themselves, but what catches my attention in the very video where Ms. Moaiery spoke in an interview with Reuters is that despite the Islamic Republic using so much repression, from heavy prison sentences to executions, there's also a striking courage in Iran, whether among political activists, protesters, or journalists. Just look, Ms. Moaiery herself came out without a hijab and is speaking English with Reuters. Where do you think this confrontation between the power of Iranian society and the Islamic government in Iran is headed? How long can the Islamic Republic resist all these people who seem to be standing up bravely? There are people like Yalda, and so many people we saw in the streets during December, January, and during various waves of protests. And between the protests, we saw how people, journalists, reporters, political and civil activists, ordinary people, how involved they are, how much the country's future matters to them, and they won't back down at all. And it's this that many believe the regime might be able to get past the war. But even if it gets past the war, during peacetime, it can't even respond to its people's demands. It can't stop the people. It is crucial to recognize that the authorities' grievance with Yalda Moaiery, a seasoned photojournalist who has spent over 2 decades meticulously documenting significant socio-political events in Iran and who recently held a prominent photography exhibition in California, does not stem from any pro-war stance on her part. On the contrary, Ms. Moaiery has consistently stood against warfare throughout her distinguished career, whose primary defiance lies in her resolute refusal to serve as a mouthpiece or instrumental tool for the Islamic Republic's state-sponsored propaganda surrounding military conflict, choosing instead to maintain her unwavering journalistic integrity and commitment to unbiased truth. But the Islamic Republic doesn't accept it. It doesn't accept that you might want to oppose the war due to humanitarian or ethical reasons, or whatever belief you have, yet not want to come under its flag. They definitely want to bring you under their own flag. And this is what makes the regime angry, this independence that exists, and the fact that it doesn't let the regime exploit this opposition to a war that it started itself, or many others did, for its own goals. Well, this obviously made the IRGC officials angry and pushed them to hand down a very irrational sentence to this press activist. But with this ongoing international economic pressure and the very mild protests we see inside, meaning civil resistance in another form, whether among journalists or as citizens among ordinary people, how much bandwidth for resistance do you think the Islamic Republic has? The scope of resistance in Iran has grown much, much larger. For example, 10 or 15 years ago, there were limited groups that collided with the government, had friction and tension in various areas, causing clashes, like leading to people's arrests. And many people passed right by these incidents. For instance, 20 years ago, when things happened to me or others, the environment was more restricted. Or if we go back 10 years, we see fewer people were involved. Today, the number of individuals demanding a serious societal shift and pivot in Iran has expanded dramatically compared to past years. Public awareness has deepened, and the collective desire for fundamental transformation is stronger than ever. Renowned photojournalist Yalda Moaiery represents one of these millions calling for progress. Armed with her camera, she actively documents this historic movement, capturing the evolving desires, courageous voices, and changing faces of the people on the ground. And the excuse they brought up for her, like taking photos and sharing them with networks, is in my opinion completely illogical, unprofessional, and fabricated, and it really shows how worried the government is about a society that speaks its mind so directly. Yalda Moaiery received a 15-year sentence, yet told Reuters she will not back down from her work. She noted that despite being imprisoned multiple times, including 3 years previously and 3 months during the Woman Life Freedom Movement, she refuses to give up. Yalda's defiant message is far from unique. Her unwavering commitment reflects a widespread sentiment held by many people inside the country who continue to resist despite repeated arrests, imprisonment, and ongoing state pressure. In my opinion, when we see, for example, the government making Hossein Tayeb the head of the Basij organization, it's clear that that it is once again taking on a new battle array against its own people, and wants to keep this issue of Crackdown at its absolute highest level. Sentences like 15 years in prison for a press photographer, are a kind of warning to the rest. But I say, just as it didn't work in previous years, it won't work now either. And these statements that Yalda herself makes, and the courage she shows in expressing them, while ignoring all this threat and intimidation going on, is in my opinion extraordinary. Just imagine someone who was in prison for 3 years, and for another few months in 2022, now gets a 15-year sentence. She could feel sorry for herself for her entire life, change her whole life, change her life and her family's life. Yet with total calm, she says, I won't back down for my work, and I'll keep doing it. And in my opinion, as you pointed out, this courage, this greatness that exists, this desire for change, this determination that's present, will be decisive in the coming months in Iran.
In these years following the Islamic Revolution, while a huge number of journalists fled Iran because of the conditions, you yourself were active in Iran at one time. Perhaps it can be said that, fortunately, there's finally a space outside of Iran. There are plenty of Persian-language media outlets where these journalists have been absorbed and are continuing their work. Maybe part of it is because of the hostility the Islamic Republic has with the rest of the world too, and so there is this appetite to create Persian-language media. But we know that even inside Iran, despite all those pressures, there are still journalists who, with difficulties that are completely incomparable to the work we're doing, are trying to inform the public. How much do you think sentences like this and pressures like this can make this body, which right now is already severely weakened, even weaker? Or do you think the resistance of journalists will stand up to it?
As you said, the body has become severely weakened, because the pressure that has existed was continuous, constant, persistent, and at its highest level. Just this year alone, 16 journalists were arrested. It's not just Miss Yalda Moaiery. There's the issue of summonses, threats, revoking licenses, closing down newspapers, and certainly, this body is very weakened. But as you pointed out, this resistance that exists, this desire for change, this sense of responsibility that exists among this very journalism community is truly admirable. So many of the stories and reports that we see, so much of the information and statistics that exist inside the country and get published all around the world, these are things that local journalists and many local citizens speak about anyway, bring up these stories, give reports, and we find out about them. And if it weren't for them, really, our eyes to a part of Iranian society would be completely closed, and we'd hear much less about those dynamics and the developments happening there.
Thank you so very much, Omid Memorian, political analyst at the Dawn Institute, joining us from Detroit, Michigan. Well, before the end of the program, we have time to go to Colombia. We have live images. From Pereira, Colombia, as you can see, rescue workers are trying to save those who still remain under the rebel, and whose chances of staying alive grow much smaller as the hours pass. Search operations to find survivors are continuing. It was an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.4 on Monday that severely shook the west of the country. And according to the latest figures as of today, at least 273 people have been killed, and more than 3,800 people have been injured. It's suspected that the death toll will turn out to be much higher than this. I should mention that with more than 3 days passed since the earthquake, identifying survivors and finding them has decreased. But as you can see in this picture too, rescue operations are still ongoing, and in some areas, first responders say they've detected signs of life under the rubble. The Colombian government has also declared a state of economic emergency to allocate more resources for relief efforts and rebuilding the affected areas. Very shocking images from Colombia have been posted on social media over the past few days, which I'm sure you've seen some of. We'll wrap up the show right here. Thank you for tuning in.